to the show. I'm your host, Joy Velez. This is the Mental Breakdown. Today, I am joined by a friend, colleague, former grad school mate, Coach Dan Ourian. Currently is one of the assistant directors for the Applied Sport and Performance Psychology program at Dominican University over back in California, my hometown, my home state. But we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about his coaching experience. Not just at the various levels of, high school, middle school, college, things like that, but also his experience coaching overseas. But then also the impact that the game of basketball has had on him as a person, but also how it drove him to the field he's in now, which is sports psychology. So go ahead and take a listen. Right, download, rate, review, subscribe, all the terminology you can think of in terms of every single podcast or YouTube, whatever. You know where I'm going with this. But take a listen. Thank you for joining. And then we'll talk soon. If you randomly shift like mid podcast, I think that'd be kind of hilarious, to be honest. It'd be a good chance to test my ability to combat distractions.
It's good for ratings, man. It's all good for ratings.
You get me, dude. You get me. What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm good, brother. I'm good, man. What am I looking at behind you? I think I see Kobe guarded by MJ.
Oh yeah. Under it says "Legends never die." Yeah, little Kobe backing down MJ.
Facts.
Then can you see what that one is?
I think I see your boy Steph Curry on a reverse lay.
Yep. Okay. Olympic volleyball, beach volleyball great, Chase Bunninger missing the block on that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you got
Steph, the underrated finisher, not shooting a three ball, but the underrated finisher that he is.
Don't sleep on it, man. Don't sleep on it. It was funny, like even just me thinking about getting you on here, I was like, this could easily turn into a basketball episode and not a sports psych episode. Either way, I'm in.
Whatever direction you want to go.
Heck yeah. I definitely want to talk about the Olympics for a hot second, because watching that USA basketball game, those last 2.5 minutes where Steph just went crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like even just watching it, you can feel the energy in the arena each time he made a shot.
No question. But when you've been watching him for a long time, it's not that surprising to the Curry flurry.
Yeah.
Right. He gets hot, one shot to get hot, and then just keep finding them.
That's the crazy thing too, is like he does that so often, but yet even in that moment, like I wasn't
surprised,
but like I was at the same time, or like maybe I could get the same excitement from it.
It's almost like suddenly you're vaulted into a game 7 of a finals, right? It's like suddenly the stakes are super high. You're on the road, hostile environment.
Man, that was in France, like playing against France, like gold medal game. Couldn't ask for more,
Story, bro. I think story player.
Heck yeah. Now you obviously have an extensive basketball background. How did you I'm assuming you played growing up, like when did you also get into coaching? What's that background like?
Yeah, so played all growing up, kind of discovered the game a little bit later than some, like really just didn't know it existed until age 9. But the moment I saw basketball and properly was sat in front of a game was a sort of jaw-dropping moment. It's like, this is the thing, right? Yep. And then that goes since. So played ever since, just a junkie for it, with aspirations to play, like any other kid, aspirations to go to the NBA. And, at a certain point, reality sets in and, I'm riding the pine on high school varsity, and it's like, man, I'm not going to even be able to play college basketball, but I loved it so much that, I was studying the game the whole way through and reading a history of the game, really, really a student of the game throughout. And then I went to a D3 school called Wesleyan University in Connecticut.
Okay.
And my education in basketball continued. So I went on to manage at the collegiate level. And I went abroad for a semester, and I started coaching when I went abroad. So I went abroad to Jerusalem, and I was 20, and I started coaching at that point. I coached in a Palestinian private school in the old city of Jerusalem, and I was coaching 15 and 16-year-old kids. and phenomenal experience. Very, very different kind of experience, but very, very impactful. And I kind of knew I wasn't going anywhere playing, so I'm going to get into
Mhm.
coaching, because for me it was like, hey, how do you stay involved in the competitive side of the game where, you get to enjoy the roller coaster of it,
Yeah,
writing about it, media, that sort of thing just didn't appeal to me, because it felt like you'd be an outsider.
yeah,
Refereeing, things of that nature just didn't appeal to me. I
yeah.
wanted to be on the inside of the sort of the, you're hanging on the highs and the wins and the losses. So coaching was the avenue for me. And then when I graduated from my undergrad, I immediately got into it, started coaching camps. I head coached a middle school team and just stuck with it ever since. So been pretty lucky. The game has taken me across the globe, really, and I've coached at a lot of different levels. I coached a high school varsity team out here in the Bay Area for 5 years. Assistant coach at the collegiate level for a few years in New York City,
Mhm.
and it was a trainer, right? And now I make a joke, you could throw a basketball in any direction now and hit a basketball training session. But I was doing that for a long time in New York City. I was riding my bike around the different parks, and had a basketball backpack on my back
Heck
and just
yeah.
did. So yeah, it's been a nice journey, and I'm really, really grateful for it.
Heck yeah. Yeah, I had that realization too, of maybe NBA is not the dream. Being a 6 foot center with no handles. I found out real quick, like, oh, okay, this isn't a thing anymore. All right, I guess I gotta shift paths.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and I was kind of the same way, like I wanted to be involved in it one way or the other. I think
Hmm.
I thought about, the kinesiology route, but like there was too much going on with muscles and things like that. I just couldn't grasp it. I thought about going the agent route, but like I don't think that's me. So it's like, oh wait, weird here. Here's sports psychology. I guess that's going to be my route. But yeah, I think just finding a way to stay involved in the game as much as you can, I think is always it's fun, man. It's a good game.
It's a good game. It's a great game, right? Soccer supposedly is a beautiful game, but I would say basketball rivals it. But yeah, I think, it's hard to find a lane that fits for you. And for me, it sounds like for you as well, it was coaching and then
Yep.
sports psych. When I was coaching, it really felt like I need to add the mental piece. I need to add sports psych in order to add to my coaching.
Yep.
And funny thing happens along the way, to your journey. I just realized along the way I'm really passionate about sports psychology, and so now working with basketball players on the mental side is really scratching that itch in a new way. So it's
Yeah.
been cool.
So that's what got you into the field was like I feel like this is going to be a good component to add to my coaching, and then oh weird, now I'm kind of making the shift to just that as opposed to coaching.
Yeah, kind of really. It took off. When I started my master's degree. Going to JFK and feeling like, wow, this is really turning a light on in a new way, a way I hadn't thought of. Um, and also, at that point in time, you sort of look at the coaching ladder, and I know that the coaching ladder is really, really steep. A lot of it is grinding, is
Yeah.
is not to fear hard work, but really just the idea of, it's less about what you know about the game. It's even less about, like, who it becomes about recruiting and what you could bring in.
Yeah.
Some of the anecdotes I would hear about college basketball and climbing that was really not appealing to me. I was also, starting a family, and I felt like
Yeah.
I gave my heart to coaching in a big way. Um, but I kind of looked at the trajectory of it, and I didn't want to be the kind of husband and dad who was, I'm on the road, 60% of the year, or during the season, I'm just not there, long hours,
Yeah.
and missing. It's just not my trajectory. It's not for me. Sports psychology really gave me a path that I felt really passionate about, but allowed me to balance things that made sense for
Yeah.
where I was at the time.
Yeah, it still allows you to stay in the sport that you love, right? Obviously a different hat on, but still allows you to be within that experience, but also allows you to have a family life too. Because yeah, you hear about coaches all the time, like football coaches especially just staying at the office, 90% of their week because they got to get
Yeah,
things done, you know?
yeah, Yeah.
easy if you don't have a family to do, right? But like, yeah, when you got other people to take care of, like other people growing up in your household, it's like that just doesn't have the same appeal.
That's right. And one of our mutual contacts, a mentor of mine, Graham Betchart, I'll never forget early on in my time in the Bay Area and studying, I sat down with him and he said a few words to me that kind of blew my mind that I had never properly thought of before. I had never really conceived of the idea before. And it was just, you are not your sport.
Yeah,
You're a human being who chooses to do your sport. And when you fully embrace that and sit with that and let it marinate a little bit, you start to recognize there's more to me as a person, as a human being, beyond whatever my endeavor may be. And that's actually not going to say I care less about the endeavor. It's just going to help me recognize I'm free. Whatever happens in my endeavor, I'm free and I'm not defined by it. And that whole concept, that idea of athletic identity kind of shifted the path for me. It really did. And I'm so glad that it did, because it's been a nice diversion, a nice new direction for me.
yeah. And when I had him on the show, like he and I definitely talked about that too, right? Was like not attaching what you do to who you are.
Mm.
Like you are, yeah, basketball coaching is definitely a part of you, but it's not all of you, right? Like there's
Right.
a whole bunch of laundry list of other things, right? Father, son, I don't know if you're a brother or not.
Mm.
But like, there's a whole laundry list of other things that make you you. And if one of it doesn't work, okay, like that sucks. I really enjoy this part, but like here are so much other things that make me me. Right. And I
Right.
think you hear about a lot of time athletes who retire from their sport, like why they have a hard time transitioning is because a lot of them is like, no, this sport is me. Without the sport, I'm nothing. It's like that's not completely true, right? Like
Right.
it's only
Right.
going to make that transition harder.
Some people will argue, well, when you have a fallback or you have a plan B, you're not going to go as hard as the person who's just, I'm doing this because it's everything. There is no
Yeah,
plan B.
yeah,
And that aligns with Mamba mentality, right? And so I try to find the right balance in all of that, because I think a lot of what Kobe said and did, what he espoused, really, really powerful. But I don't encourage a lot of the same things for all my players too, because I don't think it's for everyone. And
yeah,
so it's complicated. I think you have to find the right path. I also, growing up wanting to coach, I grew up a New York Knicks fan in the 90s. And so my guy was Jeff Van Gundy.
heck
And
yeah.
my Jeff Van Gundy, hanging from Alonzo Mourning's leg, like, you know, practice the next day with the bags under his eyes because he
Yeah,
had been sleeping in the office watching film. That was my hero. That
yeah,
was my route. Was, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to work harder than anyone. I'm going to study more, and I'm going to go that route. And again, things change, perspectives shift. I think when you get a little older, you get a little wiser and you recognize this is a path, a path. It is not the only path. And it's also not how you would define yourself when you pass. Like when we pass on and die, will the tombstone have your record, like your coaching record, how you shot from the field,
yeah,
right? Or will it start with husband, father, whatever, brother, son? What kind of person were you?
yeah.
And I often ask my athletes, like, how would your mom describe you? Would she start with like, oh man, you got to see his three ball, like he's just, you when, don't
The
leave him
guy's
open.
got great comes off screens in a really solid manner, right? Like,
Oh man, he's locked down. No, no, your mom wouldn't describe you that way.
yeah,
She might say you love the game, right? But there's more to you. Your personhood is not defined as such.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, same thing. I've even used that strategy of like, what's in your Twitter bio, right? Or for people that like what would be on your bio, and it's like,
right,
yeah, maybe hoop is in there, but like there's also 4 or 5 other things in there.
right, right,
Basketball is just a component of
right.
you. Does that so um how often does that come up with the work that you do with that? So you don't have to dive too much in, right? But like how does that come up a lot with the athletes you work with? Like separating identity?
almost all the time.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times people will come to you and I when they're really bought in. If you're going to see a mental skills coach, you're probably really bought into the game. You're working your body, you're working your skills.
Yeah.
You want to work your mind, you're probably really, really bought in. But so much so sometimes that you've already intertwined your identity with your sport and your results. And so, so much of the time, it'll be someone like late in high school or a collegiate athlete where we have to try to unravel that.
Yeah.
And, I always do this, like you're tangled up with your sport, and what happens there is this is not just in service of well being, though I would say it is first and foremost in service of your well being. It is also in service of your performance because when your results impact your self worth, then you're going to play timid. You're going to play fear of failure.
Yeah.
You're not going to play free. And so when you can recognize that you are not tangled up with your sport, that you're a human being, you choose to play a sport, then you can play with freedom. You can go to the gym knowing whatever happens, you're going to go home, you're safe, you have food, you have shelter, you are loved.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I think too, it's not to say that even in that situation in there, right? It's not to say the results don't matter, right? They still, especially whatever level you're playing, right? Like if you're in a rec league, yeah, okay, who cares if we win or lose, right? But like if you're a collegiate athlete, professional athlete, the results still matter. But like you
absolutely.
said, it's not attaching the result, the outcome to your self worth and who you are. That is
That's
when it
right.
gets dangerous, right?
Right. And so of course it matters because you care. You put your heart and soul into an endeavor. You're passionate. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And it is not one and the same. And I often find, and I've worked with pro athletes that have a really strong grounding. They're like, I'm a husband now, and I really care about how I am to my wife, or I'm a man of faith. I've had a client who's like a really strong man of faith, and that is what he is judged by, and how he
Yeah.
sees himself first and foremost. And I found that often the best understand that concept and can separate out who they are from what they do.
Yeah.
And the huge piece, I think, that many times we don't tell players until it's too late, until that tangling starts to happen. When they start at 10, 11, 12, and we put scoreboards on and the parents start yelling and
Yeah.
you that now we tell them the message they're getting is that this is super important. And I'm not trying to say it's unimportant. I'm trying to say, remember perspective.
Yeah.
This is all a fabricated game that we love and we treasure, and it's still a game.
Yeah.
So remember, you play your sport. You don't work your sport.
Yeah.
And that. But again, sometimes I'll tell a player, these are just words I'm throwing at you. You have to sit with it. You have to let it marinate.
Yeah.
And then over time, you can kind of rewire your system.
Yeah. And I think too, hearing you say that, I think a lot of times what I've been doing recently with mental skills training is not necessarily giving them a skill, but just giving them a different perspective. Like, hey, here's
Yeah.
this, think about it. As opposed to being
Yeah.
like, oh, like change your self-talk, like
Right.
have a different focal point, like instead of
Right.
focusing on the result, right? Process oriented, all those nice little buzzwords that people hear. But
Right.
yeah, I think part of it is like, let me just give you this perspective and just sit on it, right? Let me know
Right.
what you think in a couple days.
That's right. Yeah, that's huge. Just frameworks, right?
Yeah.
Different ways of thinking about it.
Yeah.
Just
Did
enough
you
to think about it.
yeah, did you have a revelation like that yourself, once you started having a family?
I think it really happened before. I was
Yeah.
engaged, but I had that conversation with Graham. Really was a light bulb moment. I look
Yeah.
back on. But then I knew what kind of father I wanted to be. I think for me, my dad was so engrossed in his work that he would come home super late and leave super early, and I just wanted
Yeah.
to be. I wanted to be around more involved. Um, to me, that's bigger than basketball. It's bigger than whatever endeavor I might have chosen to do. Is being a dad is a more important role for me. So yeah, I'm really proud of that, and so far so good.
Yeah. And you hear people talk about it all the time. Like one of the greatest jobs in the world is being a parent.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's
It's hard to
entirely
duplicate that.
Yeah. Well, my sister has said it succinctly, like it's the hardest thing and the best thing, right? It's
Yeah.
it's just super, super, super challenging in ways I never expected or anticipated. And it's absolutely very, very rewarding.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Well, I want to get into your work a little bit. Not just your past, but also currently what you're doing. And I think you kind of mentioned it, but yeah, you spent time overseas, uh, coaching basketball. Was that the Peace Players International, or was that something completely different?
That's right. So I coached basketball when I studied abroad, but then 8 years later, I went back and I worked with Peace Players International. I was a program director in the Middle East. It's an organization that uses basketball to bring children together in
Okay.
conflict regions. And so it originated in Northern Ireland, working with Catholic and Protestants.
Okay.
Then went to South Africa, kind of like black and white integration, but also a lot of HIV/AIDS education. And then continued on to the Middle East, working with Jews, Arab Israelis, and Palestinians. And so, I had a background in that region. And so when I remember, I saw, Chad Ford, he used to write for ESPN. He
Yeah.
wrote this big article about peace players. It was called Playing for Peace at that time. And I just, it was like another moment. I'm sitting there reading this, and it's the sort of thing you think is a dream. Maybe I had the thought that basketball can be used to make peace.
Yeah.
But here was his organization doing it, and in that moment, I was just like, I have to do this. I have to at least try to see if I can do this.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I did. I was able to go there, and I lived there for 2 years, from 2007 to 2009, and I like to say it's the best thing I've ever done or will ever do in my career. Super impactful.
Yeah.
Both what I was able to give, but really what I got from doing it, and also some friendships, relationships I have to this day from that. Um,
What was the biggest, I don't want to say takeaway, what was the biggest thing you learned with that experience?
well, I think people are, although the adults in the room sometimes may be further apart, the children may be able to be closer than we realize, right? So, they're obviously taught a lot by their parents, but
Mhm.
hate and fear are more learned than we realize. And if you put a ball between two kids, they know how to play. And this idea that if kids can play together, they can learn to live together is super powerful.
Yeah.
And we saw that in action all the time. And it'd be like, on an off day, one of the Israeli kids didn't have a practice. He took his ball and he walked up to the Arab village, 15-minute walk, and went to their practice. And that sort of thing was very revelatory, and sort of see, it's a mess of a conflict over there. And
Yeah.
obviously now, last 7 months or so, it's taken a turn for the worse. And this is kind of a drop in the bucket in the ocean of like peacemaking there. But on a person to person level, we've seen a lot of successes from that. So it was really, really powerful 2 years for me.
Yeah, just seeing how even just through the game of basketball, right? Like here's a sport that can bring people together where it's like I'm not looking at race, gender, values, beliefs, whatever it is, right? It's like we're on a basketball court, let's just hoop and have fun. You
Right.
know?
Can shoot. Yeah. Wait, he's just cut to the rim, like he's not
Yeah. Yeah,
got more.
I don't care what you believe in. Backdoor
Right.
the guy, man. Like,
Yeah.
come on.
Like he's not looking. Cut back door.
You're open,
Yeah.
man. Shoot it. Like, what the hell?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Uh,
and it's a politicized sport, than football or soccer is over there. And it's a very intimate sport, right? Like the court is smaller. You have to pass 10 to 15 feet away. You're gonna rub elbows. Like there's an intimacy to basketball, which is beautiful. So yeah, it was a perfect sport for that kind of peace building.
okay, heck yeah. And then yeah, from there, like you kind of not branched up, but you continued here in the States coaching at various levels. How did I want to ask you this because like it sounds like wanting to add sports psychology is what turned you on adding adding another skill to my coaching toolbox, right? Let me go do sports psychology and figure that out. Um, how does like mental skills, what role does that play in you being a coach? Like, how does that show up in your performance?
I think for me, it was really, I was definitely a yeller. I came up in New York City, and I definitely was a yeller as a coach early on. I was on the sidelines trying to orchestrate the entirety of the game on both sides of the ball. And
Yeah.
and it took a while for me to realize how ineffective that was. And yelling something like focus, like yelling at my players to focus, or you know, we're in a timeout and it's a high leverage situation and I want them to like be calm, and I'm the most frantic dude out there.
Yeah.
I'm not calm. I'm not at all. And so for me, it was realizing like I need to work these skills myself, right? I need to be able to teach these things, and I need to be able to utilize it myself in order to appropriately give it to someone else. So I think I learned it that way. But also, for me, even beyond that, as a young person playing, I felt performance anxiety. I felt very,
Yeah.
very nervous before games. I was always one way in a practice, and then, turn the scoreboard on, it's a game, and I played another way. I always felt the eyeballs on me and that sort of sense of, evaluation. And so all of that, I think, in totality led me to pursuing sports. Like I always knew it was a direction I wanted to take, and it required a leap of faith at some point.
Yeah.
And I took a long time from my undergrad to my graduate pursuit, and I'm glad I did. A lot of coaching. I was a sport programs director at a Y in New York City.
Yeah.
Really, really great spot to be, training and running leagues and such. The 92nd Street Y in New York. And it was just time. I knew it was time to go and pursue this. And so, I met my future wife and, then my girlfriend, and we both took a leap of faith to move to California. And
Yeah.
right, and here we are.
Yeah, that's big because like if it forced you to get not I won't say give up a lot of things, right? You had to make a lot of sacrifices, like moving across the country. You knew coaching was probably going to have to be given up at some point, which is something you poured your blood, sweat, and tears into, for the good
Mhm.
portion of your life. So yeah, it's like that's a big move for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know for me, like not that I had the same jump because I grew up 5 minutes from JFK, but because I think back to my playing days, when I was playing in high school, I was the one who was always focusing on everything outside of my control.
Mm.
I was the one always wondering like, why me? Why isn't coach playing me? What am I doing wrong? Why aren't I playing? Like, this sucks. Like, what am I even doing here? And
Mhm.
I think when the light bulb moment went off, like during, when I figured out sports psychology was a thing, junior year, wasn't playing, did everything I could to be the best teammate I could be, one most
Mm.
inspirational. Senior year, I'm told I'm going to play more, and then I actually played less.
Mm.
Now I just didn't care anymore. I still got most inspirational, but now it was like, oh, I'm just the kid who cheers a lot that doesn't play, as opposed to I earned that, you know.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
you think back on it, it's like I missed out on my senior year with my six best friends. We had the team's best record in like 20, 30 years, first playoff appearance in 20, 30 years, almost upset uh um Berkeley High in the first round of NCS, 12 versus a 5 seed. We're winning
Nice.
late in the fourth quarter, and the only thing I remember from that game is that they put in the sophomore 6'6" kid instead of me when our starting power forward was in trouble with like 8 minutes left.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's all I
Still
really
there.
cared about, So it's
It's
like
still wound. The wound is still there.
it's still there for sure, right? But like it's like, God, just put me in, dude. I'll make a couple threes.
Yeah.
But like I look back on that, it's like I don't want other people to feel that way.
Right.
Like, granted, it sucks not playing, sure, but it's like focusing on why do I suck? Why isn't this person playing me? That's not going to get me more playing time.
Right.
Even if I put in all the effort in the world, it still might not get me more playing time. But how can I make the best of this situation?
Right.
You
Right.
know?
Just takes away from the experience
Yeah.
ultimately.
And I think that's the big part, right? It took away from that experience of being a senior on varsity playing a sport that I love.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. We try to accelerate someone's path of understanding, and it's tough when you're in it, when you want something so much and it's just not going the way you would have liked, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to create the narrative then that says, okay, well, years from now, I'm going to be talking about this as a critical and pivotal moment that actually I jumped off from, that helped me in the long run. In the moment, we can't see that,
Yeah.
right? So we just try to help people see what might be a little bit later on.
Yeah. Better late than never,
Yeah.
But that
Yeah.
experience like allowed me to now do what I do. Right. So I think the other thing you said too is like you as a coach, you're in like a huddle and you're yelling at kids to like focus or to calm down and you're not calm. Every time I talk to like a new class at my job and I'm introing like sports psychology, what mental skills training is, I go the route of like y'all the buzzwords that coaches say. I need you to focus. Uh,
Right.
I need you to be mentally tough. Like
Right.
all these words that people say, and you're just like, what the hell does that mean, though? That's where I was at, man.
Oh,
Coach telling
you
me to
gotta calm
relax. I just
down.
ran 2 suicides and I'm shooting free throws. What do you mean relax? Like if
Right. Right.
I
Right.
miss
Right.
while running, I don't want to do that. So
Out.
yeah, so now you're in this role as like a consultant, and I think one thing that was it kind of was a challenge for me at first, I think you learn to deal with it though. But since you have such an extensive basketball background as a coach, what are the challenges of you now being a mental performance consultant with basketball players? Or is it a challenge, right? Like crossing over those two boundaries.
I don't. I I very rarely will delve into skills of the game. I'm very clear on, do you want advice about, what I'm seeing? And I'll be very clear. I'll tell a player, I've coached a lot. I've coached at the varsity level, and it's the level you're at, let's say, and do you want advice? And so I'll just vet that first. But I very rarely go that direction. I think I more so just kind of keep it to the mental game. And I
Mm,
think for me that's been a pretty clear line, but I do think knowing the game intimately has helped me work with those players. There's just something to, even beyond terminology, there's just a culture to every sport, right?
yeah, yeah,
There's a way to understand basketball. There's a way to understand, the importance of your kicks. There's a way to understand, if I talk about Kyrie Irving to someone, there's a shared understanding of what that player represents, right?
yeah, yeah,
And so on and so forth. We talk about, okay, do you model your game after anyone in particular? And we can have those touch points because there's a shared understanding of the whole landscape. And I think that's where it really, really helps to have that comfortability. I think it really helps in your training to work in sports outside of your main sport, just to really show yourself, A, you can learn a new sport. B, I'm an expert in the mental side of the game. It can translate to whatever the performance is. And
yeah.
it's helpful to see that you can do that, and to see the transferability. But I think when you have a really intimate understanding of a sport, it could just help you, as long as you're not really crossing boundaries without that kind of approval or desire from the athlete.
Yeah, right. I'm not out there showing somebody how to do like a back down drop step, like, hey, go baseline, do a nice little baby hook,
Right,
like,
right. But I will add that, part of my master's degree, what I've created is a curriculum that integrates both on court training with mental skills. And so, it's a program where you're doing work on court and we incorporate mantras, we incorporate imagery, we incorporate breathing techniques within the fabric of what we're doing on court. And I think that's a really positive direction for our field. And, Robin Veely and others have talked about the value of integrating the two. So it's not, you have to go and talk to the mental skills coach in an office, it's off court, and there's that, maybe that stigma. It's, we're right here on the court. This is where your game happens.
yeah.
And we can take a breath right now. And we can close our eyes right now and visualize our success and so forth. And I think there's a lot of power in doing that. And so for me, integrating the two has been really, really fun. And I'll often work with players, when I take on a new client and they're local, I'll do some of the sessions on court
Yeah.
and go through it, and we'll set process goals at the start of a workout, and we'll pause and do some imagery, etc. So that's been a really good direction too. And I think that's a way we can innovate as those who have coached.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about that curriculum because I did see that. Was that a part of your grad school? It wasn't the capstone. That's what I did for the MBA.
Yes, project. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask you about that, but so I want to get your opinion on this too because I totally believe if we can get them in the environment as we're doing the mental skills training, I think it's only going to benefit it, right? Because you can show like actual application of like, hey, here's where you would do this, right?
Right,
I worked with the local college softball team last season. It's the same thing, talking about like in pitch routines. Like I'm having you stand in the batter's box and step out and do it. Uh,
right,
if you're playing infield, what does it look like to now step into your zone and get ready? Right,
right,
like walking through it in real space. That way, it's more natural to them. Uh,
right.
but one of the first athletes I was working with, she played basketball, local. So like we got to go into the gym for one day for practice, and I wanted to I think the talk was about confidence, you know. So there are two things I did, and I want to get your thoughts on it. One was I had her shoot free throws with her eyes closed,
Hmm.
just as a way to like enhance trust in your abilities, right? And also not focusing necessarily on the result, but let's focus on like what the form feels like and things like that. The other thing I had them do, and I did this when I was coaching also, uh, I would have players stand on the 3-point line, and I would say, "Hey, I'm going to throw you the ball, and I just want you to shoot, no hesitation." Okay. And they're like, all right. And I was like, caveat, I want you to shoot with your left hand. And they're like, what? And then I would throw them the ball. And it was funny seeing people grab it and like hesitate versus people just grab it and just shoot it. And I
Hmm.
think part of that was training like to not hesitate.
Hmm.
Yeah, the result is going to be the result. It is what it is. But like just grabbing the ball and just shooting with your opposite hand, yeah, you're going to look dumb. Yeah, you're probably going to miss, right? But still being able to go through that process and make yourself uncomfortable. Hey, guess what? You looked weird. You missed it by a mile, but you're still okay, right?
Right,
Like now, let's
right.
move on.
Yeah,
What are your
yeah.
thoughts on those two things? That was like the very first client I had. So all feedback is good feedback right now.
I think one thing is we want them to be confident in the skill that they're going to use in the game, right? So if they're not going to close their eyes when they're shooting a free throw in a game. I would maybe take them and say, shoot it to me. Like we'll just go, lane line to lane line. And I just want you to close your eyes. If you're working on the form, the feeling of the form, shoot it to me, because
Yeah,
then it's so much like I have to try to figure out where is his target now, right?
sure.
Because maybe throw off my confidence a little bit. Um, the left-handed piece, it's sort of like, trade and state confidence is like, if my trait confidence is high, meaning like generally I have confidence, sure, I'll catch this thing and throw it up with my offhand. If it doesn't go in, it's cool. I'm confident as a person. But the state confidence of like, am I confident in my ability to shoot with my left hand? Well, have I grooved it? Like, have I practiced shooting with my left? Or, if I'm a righty, if I have, then it's like, okay, maybe this thing has a chance, right? I do think it's great to give them these sort of new experiences and also just see how they respond, right? Like, did they hesitate or not? And what is that about, right? Because
Yeah,
what will happen if you miss this in a practice, right? So you can unpack that. What is the meaning behind your make or miss right now in this practice session, right?
yeah,
Why it's making you feel bad about your skills? Why is it making you feel bad? How can you unpack that? So I think it's good from that perspective. I wouldn't necessarily do the eyes closed shooting to the rim one,
yeah. I mean, it was
but
amazing, like, cause like, yeah, set up right, but then close your eyes, like it just, like where the hoop is, just feel for it, right?
right, 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 right. And then
Percentage
hey,
went down, so sure, like it could have that effect of like, oh shit, not missing, like this sucks.
yeah, yeah. I mean, practice it. So obviously, like the foundational confidence piece is previous accomplishment, including your practice. Practicing every time you succeed in practice, that's one data point for previous accomplishment, right? So
Yeah,
you can't beat that. There's nothing we can do, in my opinion, that can beat that beyond like starting with the fundamental of you as a person, personhood, athletic identity. You're free when you come to this game. After that, it's you have to practice to be confident.
yeah,
Otherwise, the talk in your mind that says you can do this is you lying to yourself.
Yeah, yeah. You need the physical reps. You need those data points for sure. Definitely helpful. You know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um. Yeah, and I think even that left-handed shooting thing, it can bring up a lot of different talking points, right? What was the source of the hesitation? Oh, I
Right.
didn't want to look funny.
Mhm.
Okay, so now like, yeah, you're worried about comparison, right? Let's talk about that,
Right.
right?
Right.
Oh, I told myself I'm not going to make this, so I hesitated. Okay, like there's lack of confidence right there. Makes sense to have a lack of confidence in your offhand, but like again, like you said, what's the impact going to be of you missing one shot right now in practice in this very one moment? You know,
Right.
if we
Right.
can't get past that, how are we going to get past a game under pressure when I'm shooting with my normal hand? I
Right.
don't know. At least that's where my mind goes. Um, so with your curriculum, right? I know. I think it's always about like more emotion regulation amongst like high school basketball coaches. Is that correct? But then you also like used it with players and teams as well. Like, walk me
So
through what that
for
is.
some reason I wrote a research thesis in addition to doing a project. So I did
Okay, hell yeah.
my research was on emotional regulation among high school varsity basketball coaches, which was great to do as I was also a high school varsity basketball coach getting my master's degree. So it was kind of meta in that way, and interviewed 10 local coaches in the Bay Area, some legends, and just got their take on it and broke that down. But separately, I did a project creating, a 12-week curriculum. It was 6 mental themes, each one repeated twice, and going through sort of, basic psychoeducation on each theme. And then, it was for kids 13 through 18. So there was level one was 13 to 15, level two is 16 through 18. And it's something that can be tweaked based on the needs of a different group, but it's
Mm,
essentially taking them through a 90-minute session in which we teach about the mental skill. And then we do a lot of, basketball training, basketball skill development, but within that there are pieces of adding the mental skills we're focusing on each week.
okay. Where did all that come from? How do you develop each theme and then, the skills within the theme?
Yeah, so we have like a menu of mental skills, right? So motivation, arousal control, or that's kind of baked in with energy management,
Yeah.
um, imagery, confidence, and then what I call like teammate ability. So how are we as a teammate? How can we improve as teammates? What does that look like? um, and so um, as you go through it, you're just kind of deepening each week. You teach it, you go into the drills. There are elements of the drills that are strictly basketball. There are other drills that have a mental skill component that we're focused on, and then we bring it in and we kind of debrief it at the end. Um, but yeah, it's a neat thing to create. And it's just been rolling it out here in the Bay Area with a couple of different schools,
Okay,
and
heck yeah.
it's nice to have it as a template. Some schools can't do a 12-week curriculum, so we'll pare it down. Other times I can show them what it looks like, and they say, okay, we really struggle with focus. We really struggle with emotional regulation. Let's focus on those three and repeat those twice. And so I tweak it accordingly. Um,
Okay.
but it's a good template from which to work.
Heck yeah. Yeah, and I think, it gives, a organization or something to kind of like follow and guide them throughout, right? As opposed to just like how do we train them and decide what do we do? Well, here's a program that can kind of guide to I don't want to say your needs, but like the basic needs of that someone this age in this sport would theoretically need right now. You
Right.
know?
And so many of the, a lot of times they don't know what they don't know. They don't
Yeah.
know what they, and so here's a selection of what you might need. And usually a coach will be like, we need one, two, three, four, five, six, and, we need all of it, right?
Yeah.
Because you'll see examples of your team struggling in each of the areas. So I think it's valuable from that perspective.
Heck yeah. Um, so then from there, right, with coaching on to grad school, finished grad school, started your own consulting. Now I know you've been with DPR, Dr. Pobrodius a lot, uh,
Yeah.
going from place to place, really diving into, helping the sports psychology program at, it was first Holy Names and then now it's at Dominican, correct?
That's right. That's right.
So what caused that shift and then what sort of work are you doing within that role now?
Yeah, so really awesome to kind of be recruited by Dr. Pope Rodius. to join her. So she was, as you know, the program director, the chair of the program at JFK University, where we got our masters.
Yep.
I worked under her there while I was a student. I worked with an organization there called LEAP,
Oh yeah.
and LEAP a way to bring mental skills training to underserved youth. And I think through that and through being a decent student, she saw what I'm capable of, and she kind of plucked me to join her, starting a new program at Holy Names University. This was right at the start of the pandemic, and
Yeah.
so it was all remote, and we're building a curriculum. And I had just recently finished my master's degree, and so now I was kind of peeking behind the curtain and thinking through how would I, as a recent student, how would I change it, or what would I add to it, which is incredible. And my role really was deeply in the applied experience side. So
Okay.
helping new students with developing relationships with schools, with coaches, with ADs, making our own relationships in the communities, and then overseeing that piece of things.
Mm.
They were called internships when we were students. We call them placements now, just because the connotation of an internship maybe is
Yeah.
not what it could or should be for our role. And so we were there for 3 years, and unfortunately, that institution closed. But we were able to shift and move to Dominican University up in the North Bay, and been there for a little over a year now, and so far so good. It's a great institution. It's a Division II school. What's really great is that the coaches of the teams, the D2 teams, they're really bought into this, and we've
Yeah.
been able to put some of our students into embedding with teams and being with teams as a mental performance student in training. Um, I've been able to do some of the work with those teams as well, with men's basketball and with other teams as well, and that's been really really rewarding. So some of it is just instruction too. I teach a few courses. I teach a course on mindfulness. I teach a course called mental performance in athletic coaching. Um, and oversee the placement experiences. So it's been great. I didn't expect to get into academia in this way, but I find that I really, really love it. And it's a really nice mix between that and then private practice, hoops minded, and working with mostly basketball players in private practice.
Hold on, man. It just sounds like you found another way to stay into the coaching world without actually being involved in like a particular sport. That's
Right.
kind of what I'm hearing. So it's like you can't fully take the coach. What's the phrase? You can't take the coach out of Dan, but whatever it is, where I'm trying to go with this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I think it's pretty
Yeah.
cool though. Like it gives you a chance to make an impact. Yeah, not necessarily on athletes right now, but like on people trying to make a career. You
Right.
know.
That's right. And there's a trickle down impact from us on the team to our graduate students to those that they're working with, right? Because we're giving them feedback on how they can work with athletes, how they could be more effective. So there is some of that trickle down. Plus, I do, direct service with some of the teams, so that keeps me in it. Um, for me, it's dynamic. Every day is a little bit different. It's a good mix, and I really like that element of it.
Heck yeah. Speaking of time back in Graham, I remember I did a couple of like small workshops with the Dominican basketball team, like what was that, 4 years ago? I don't know, something like that,
Cool.
before I moved out of the state. Um, and I remember like I was just watching them play one game. I think I did like an imagery talk with them that morning, so I was watching them play, and out of the corner of my eye, I hadn't seen him in years, but there's Graham Betcher just sitting there. We locked eyes, so like we're like he was working with the players at the time, so we locked eyes, so we started talking and connecting. But then how he gave you that like light bulb moment, like he and I were talking the next day, and he did the same thing for me.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't
Yeah.
really doing anything within the field. I didn't have a job at the time, and then he kind of like he didn't push the right button, but he told me what I needed to hear, and that
Mhm.
caused me to like get into working the different contracts with the military.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
so shout out Graham, dude. He was on the episode last like a week ago.
Nice.
So
Nice.
yeah,
Yeah.
shout out Graham, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Shout out
Um,
to.
yeah, so the last thing I really want to ask you about too is, and you just mentioned it, but your work with mindfulness. Seeing you on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever it is, like Instagram. I see you bringing a lot of insight to the field of mindfulness. So how did that start? And then what was like your approach with like how you teach mindfulness to other people?
Well, honestly, I think it started way back for me, my journey as a human and my own practice of it. And I think that kind of goes back into it's sort of beyond formal education of it. Um, I think for me it goes into sort of my own discovery of Buddhism. I studied religion,
Mm,
comparative religion as an undergrad, and it always really interested me to look at how people view life. Like, what are we doing here? That's sort of the biggest questions.
yeah,
And without going too big, for the sake of time, I think that kind of piqued my interest, and Buddhism and contemplative practice really was always there for me as someone who was very curious about those elements. And then fast forward to that coach who was sort of out of sorts, not calm in the huddle, knowing there was something I wasn't doing, there was work I wasn't doing internally that would benefit me.
yeah,
And that in turn led to, studying mindfulness as a way to improve performance for others when I was a graduate student. And, Dr. Michael Gerson was my instructor at JFK University. I'm so grateful to him. He really set the table for my own practice in a way that was more structured, more formal. He had us do our own practice every day. We had to log it, you had to submit it, and you had to sit and be with your thoughts. You had to sit for a time each day and be there and be with your breath. And it had been something that I had dabbled in, but it was never something that I had the habit of doing on a daily basis. And that turned the corner for me. It was 2017 where I started meditating every day. And I still do to this day. And certainly miss a day. And I just get back on the following day. And that's okay, right? We try
yeah,
to work without judgment. And so, it's foundational to how I live, I think how I parent, how I walk in this world, and I think also, how I work with athletes. Everything is sort of nudging people in the direction of this mindfulness acceptance commitment approach, which I really, really believe in. So, some athletes will be more interested in thought stopping, thought changing, controlling. I try to accept that some need that level of fix or a band-aid, but I
yeah,
feel like there's a level beyond that that can be more impactful, which is recognizing your thoughts, recognizing your feelings, your sensations, accepting them for what they are, and allowing them to pass, and coming back to the present moment over and over and over again. And those are words that sound easy, but
yeah,
that's the work of a lifetime, right? As
yeah,
we know. So
yeah.
it's been really, really impactful for me. And then in turn, I think it's really the framework by which I operate when I work with others.
Yeah, and I think that's the cool thing about what we do. And I've even made this shift. I don't think I was necessarily this way when I first graduated, but it's like we don't need to try to avoid or stop anything. Sure,
Right.
it's helpful, right? But like, I don't think you're ever going to fully be able to stop counterproductive thoughts, right? No matter how much training you do, they're going to pop in there. But instead of trying to like avoid them or stop them, like normalize it,
Right.
acknowledge it. Like, hey, it's there. I hear it. I see it, you know, and that's okay, right? But now
Mm,
let me, get myself back to the present, whether that's through my breath, whether that's through, contact points, whatever that is, and I think even just like the evolution, because that mindfulness has always been a thing, but it's been more prevalent, obviously, the last, last few years for sure. But I think that's just the evolution of like everything, especially now with sports psychology. It's like it's not about eliminating anything. Sometimes it's
mhm.
about just like owning it and just living with it, and that's okay. That's just as important as anything else.
No question. And it's hard to do.
Yeah,
Like a lot of this, easy to say, hard to do. But, the work works if you work it, right? So if you practice it, you will improve. And it can be a heavy lift to get someone to buy in, and the habit of the formal mindfulness practice can be a challenge.
yeah,
I mean, it's a challenge for those who regularly do it, and still there's really great dividends for those that engage it.
Yeah. I always joke with some of the people I work with. They're like, "Hey, how do I stop thinking this?" It's like, "Oh, just stop." And then it'll just like awkwardly sit there for a couple of seconds, and they're just like, "What?" I'm like, "Nah, I'm just kidding, man. Like, let's talk about it, you know?" Yeah, because like you said, they're at the end of the day, they're words, right? It's easy for me to say, but like it's easy for to read this stuff, but like ultimately you have to practice this thing,
Right,
these
right,
any of these things, and not practice it once, you know.
right.
I still remember one of my internships at JFK. Like we talked about breathing, you know. Athlete comes up to me, volleyball player. She's gonna go into serve. She's like, I'm nervous. I'm like, okay, just focus on your breathing. We've talked about this. She's like, okay, cool, got it. Goes out there, takes 2 deep breaths, serves it, ball goes under the net. So she immediately comes out and sits next to me. She's like, Joe, your skill didn't work. It's like, it don't work
Sample
like that, man. Yeah, right. Like, 0 for 1, Joe, you're out. Like, no job for
exactly.
you, you know?
So what else you got?
Yeah, yeah. Nope. Next. I'm gonna call it DPR right now. DPR, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. Like I'm clearly bad at this job. But yeah, like anything takes time, takes practice, right? Even for us as consultants too. We still
No
gotta
question.
practice and work on these things
No
too.
question. The work of a lifetime. Hmm.
Exactly. Well, like, hey, man, I appreciate you hopping on. This was awesome. It's good to reconnect again. Talked about a lot. I love hearing about your coaching career. I think I knew the outer layers of everything you did, like overseas, and even just within the coaching scene in California as well. Because like I was an assistant coach at the time too. So I always kept tabs on your school, especially in the D5 run, right? Like
Yeah,
that's what we do.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
always kept
hey,
tabs.
we had a good run. D5. Now
Always,
we
always kept tabs. Hell yeah. But then yeah, I think even just diving into your work specifically, like, especially this last part, like the importance of mindfulness and like how just starting with like a framework of thinking,
mm,
but also even like just getting people to understand different perspectives. Like, hey, I don't need to. I'm not going to skill you right now. I'm just going to give you some food for thought and then
mhm.
marinate and then see what happens.
Right.
Um,
That's
yeah, but one thing I want to leave you with, or I want you to leave everybody else with, is like a word of advice you have for the audience, and not necessarily with like mental skills training, but like you made a big decision to pick up your life in New York and come out here, right? So, what would you say to people who are in like a similar situation where it's like, do I take this leap of faith or not? Like, what word of advice could you give to those kind of people?
yeah. I mean, it's hard to give a blanket bit of advice, and who knows what someone is going through or what their
Sure.
challenges are and what the circumstances are. What I would say is that usually we have more regret about not doing than doing, right? Because you can always do and see it wasn't right and go back, right? But if you never do, you'll never know, right? And so I think taking that leap of faith or just starting a project that you have or going and doing the new thing, a lot of times you'll find, okay, I got uncomfortable and now it's great. Or you might find this isn't the right room for me and I gotta leave, right? Um, I saw recently like better to close the door than to stay in the wrong room forever, right? Like if
Mm,
it's not right, then you can backtrack, but usually you will regret not doing, not trying, not starting as opposed to doing. So that would be my bit of advice,
love
you
that.
know,
Love that.
um, go
And I
out
think
and
that
try.
also kind of adds to our work, right? As like getting people to understand that, hey, like you can make the decision, and if it doesn't work out, you can always go back to this. Like that
Right.
is still an option. It's okay. Right. But yeah, kind of like we talking about, the only way you're going to find out is if you go find out, right? And then just
That's,
kind of see what happens after that.
that's
Well,
right.
hell yeah, man. Appreciate you having on. Where can the people find you? Where's the best way they can find Coach Dan?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm on Instagram at hoops minded. I'm on Twitter or X at Danny Hoops, either of those. But love anyone who's listening to check out our program at Dominican University, California. We have a great applied sport and performance psychology graduate program there. So definitely go check out those things. And really just appreciate you having me on. It's great to reconnect with you. And
Yeah.
back out in the Bay Area, I want to hear from you.
Oh, we'll do it, man. Yeah, shout
Uh,
out the old JFK crew. They're still revving it strong, just at a different location.
there you go.
Uh, all my hoopers who listen to this, whether you're in the Bay or not, yeah, give him a follow, give him a shout, man. He'll get you right, whether it's sport or not sport related. So, yeah, appreciate you having you on, everybody. Hey, go ahead and like, follow, rate, review all the sites. YouTube channel, whichever one. I'll put all the contact in the description below for sure. But thank you all for taking the time to listen today. Have a great day. Don't forget, today is a great day to make an impact. All right, y'all. Have a good one.